Hey there, fellow gamers. This is DM Nil, and I'm back with another Tonight We Game. And I haven't done one of these in a while. Um, Actually, lots of different topics that I've been wanting to talk about, but I just haven't found the time to do so. But one that is kind of pressing on me right now, I do want to cover with you, and that is the Shadowdark RPG. So the Shadowdark RPG had just completed a Kickstarter and had made over $1 million, which is quite a bit for an RPG, um, especially one that kind of came out of nowhere. Now, I'm not going to go into the background of the Kickstarter or how Shadowdark came into be or anything like that. There's already videos, lots of videos out there about that. But I'm pretty surprised that it made the money that it did, just considering that ultimately there's not really a whole lot of new stuff here. But again, not really what I wanted to talk about. There are reviews about Shadowdark elsewhere on YouTube, so you can search those out. What I wanted to talk about is I've run, I think, four, maybe five sessions of Shadowdark now. And I just kind of wanted to talk through my experiences with this RPG. Now, keep in mind that I've been running the sessions with just the quick start rules. I only just got access to the full rule book a few days ago, and I actually haven't even read through the whole thing yet. So I wanted to do that, and get an opportunity to use more rules from the book into the game itself. But there's enough in the quick start rules to get a lot of actual play done, at least up through some early levels. So I wanted to talk about my experiences using Shadowdark and my thoughts on the game overall. So first of all, I like it. It's a fun system. It's a simple system, um, and it's a familiar system. You will have no trouble picking up how to use this game, how to play this game from the get go. I mean, this is a D20 based role playing game. If you know how to play 5th edition, you will be able to play this game almost instantly. But there are some things that I did have some trouble with, and this is probably just me and the way that I process information. But nonetheless, I wanted to make sure that I didn't oversell this game because for at least for me, it poses a few problems. Not insurmountable problems, but just a few things that I'm going to have to consider how to do going forward. Whether I want a house rule or figure out a way how to play in in accordance to the rules as written. But so without dilly dallying around anymore, let me just jump in. So the first thing. I'm just doing this off the top of my head, so forgive me for my rambling. But the first thing I want to mention is the whole real-time RPG aspect of the game. I'm struggling with this, and the reason I'm struggling with this is because we jump in and out of real time when we're playing the game. So we could be playing the game, going through a dungeon, and then we might say, oh, wait a minute, back in town I meant to do this. And so we'll go back to town, we'll kind of do a time skip back to town, or time jump back to town, play out a little scene that we had forgotten to play but we had meant to in town, and then come forward back into the present. Okay, so how do you do that in real time in a real-time RPG where a torch burns for 1 real hour? Well, you can't unless you have a timer that you can pause, and at at that point, it kind of defeats the purpose of the simplicity of, or the intended simplicity of it being a real-time RPG. So that is, again, that's one thing that I'm struggling with, and I will more than likely probably just drop that aspect of it. If we are in an adventure that is fairly straightforward and we're not jumping around or pausing to address a character issue or whatever, then the real-time aspect of it is fine. It's just that when you have a situation in the game that causes you to stop for whatever reason and maybe jump around, maybe have a discussion, maybe have a rules discussion or whatnot, that kind of puts a crimp into the whole real-time aspect of it. Okay, so that's the first thing I have a problem with. Again, not a game breaker by any means, but just something that I'm struggling with so far, and probably going to drop as I continue. So that brings me to my second issue, and it kind of coincides with the first issue, and that is the game system itself is essentially 5e. It's essentially a bare bones version of 5th edition. So you have a d20, you have advantage and disadvantage, you have weapons that do similar damages as they do in D&D, you have spells. There are some minor differences, such as you don't have spell slots, you have spell casting rolls. But for the most part, it is almost like running 5th edition D&D. And that's where my problem comes in, because I've been immersed in 5th edition D&D off and on since it came out in 2014. And so my brain understands all the 5th edition rules that we have been using for the last 10 years, which includes opportunity attacks, which includes things like readying an action, which includes just a variety of different things, just tactical things mostly, that are not in Shadowdark. But since it's so similar to 5th edition D&D, I forget that. And when a player, and apparently the issue is with my players as well, because they want to ready an action, or they want to try to set up flanking, or they want to, or they keep asking if they get an attack of opportunity when the monster flees. And I have to force myself to remember that this game does not include those additional elements. And one of the reasons I like this game is because it doesn't include those extra elements, which means that the game moves faster. But it doesn't move faster if everybody's confused and thinking that these elements still apply, because the game is so similar to 5th edition. So that's another thing that I'm struggling with. In fact, it happened last night. I ran the game last night, and one player wanted to ready an action. I told him okay. And then later in the game, another player wanted to ready an action, and I told him no, because I remembered that readying an action is not a thing in this game. And so, and then he's like, well, wait a minute, you let him ready an action earlier. I'm like, yeah, I fucked up. So, it's things like that just crossing the wires, because the aspects of the game are very similar. And so I find myself doing that quite a bit. And more than likely what it's going to take is a concerted effort of time and energy spent running just Shadowdark and not 5th edition D&D, so that I can get used to the more simplified Shadowdark game that doesn't include all these extra elements that 5th edition includes. But for now, it's problematic for me simply because, of the crossing the streams that I continue to do in my brain. Okay, so those are a couple of the things that I'm struggling with. Not major by any means. The benefits of this game far outweigh the troubles that I'm having with it. So what are the benefits of the game? Well, like I said, it's a simplified version of 5e. I like 5e. I think it's a good system, but what I don't like about 5e is its complexity, especially with characters. All of the abilities that characters unlock as they progress up, that adds layers and layers of complexity, bonus actions, just extra attacks, just compounds to the point where when you get to high levels, the game, slows to a crawl. And this has been the problem with every RPG since 3rd edition, I think. Every D&D, I should say, not every D&D edition that's come out since 3rd edition, has this escalating problem of complexity that slows the game down to nearly a halt. Because of all of the things that player characters can do, because all the things that monsters can do, and it gets to be too much, and that's why I've essentially not been playing D&D for the last couple of years, because the last time I played, I was just like, I can't do this anymore. This is just there's just too much. There's just too much noise in this game. We can't. It takes 10 minutes to get around the table. In one round. So Shadowdark doesn't have that problem. Shadowdark keeps characters simple and keeps monsters simple, almost too simple. I'll talk about that in a minute. But yeah, it keeps them simple so that you can get through a whole round of activity fairly quickly. So that's what I like about this game, is that the characters will never be as so complex that you still can't just bust through a round in just a few minutes. So monster complexity is also a problem in D&D, but for certain monsters, they almost have to be complex. How can you run a dragon that's not complicated? How can you run a beholder that's not going to be complicated? How can you run a demon lord like Orcus or Demogorgon or the Tarrasque? All of these monsters are huge, iconic monsters, and there's going to be complexity with those monsters. So Shadowdark has very simple monsters. They have a stat block that includes the monster's ability scores, their armor class, their hit points, and maybe a trait and some attack options, and that's pretty much it. Every monster is assumed to have one attack unless it says otherwise in the stat block. So that is about as simple as it gets when it comes to running monsters. But the problem with that is it can be too simple. And the player characters can, even with their simplified characters, they can still overwhelm a solo beast if it's not prepared to take on multiple characters. So in my game last night, I was running through the sample dungeon, the Scarlet Citadel, and the boss of that dungeon essentially is the Scarlet Minotaur, which I made him I think I called him the Onyx Minotaur, just because I didn't have a red Minotaur miniature, but I had a black one, so there you go. But anyway, it's supposed to be the boss, right? It's supposed to be the big bad that the characters run into at some point that could potentially TPK them. Well, it looked scary in writing. I mean, it had a lot of hit points, like 30 some odd hit points. The characters are second level. I had 6 players, so 6 characters. And most of them are fighters, so a lot of damage dealers. And 2 clerics, so a lot of damage healing potential there as well. So for this particular party makeup, that Minotaur was woefully unprepared to be a threat to this party because, again, we had 4 fighters and 2 clerics. So even though the fighters didn't always land a hit, they landed enough hits that it whittled the hit points for the Minotaur down fairly quickly over the course of, I think, maybe 3 rounds. That in and of itself is not a problem as long as the Minotaur is dealing out damage. That was the problem. Even though it had +6 to hit, I was not rolling well, and it only had 1 attack. So, by me rolling poorly, that's 1 round where it didn't do any damage. That's not scary for anybody. And then the player characters beat up on it a little bit, take it down. Then it swings again, maybe hits 1 character, rolls low on its damage dice. It had a D10. It was using a battle axe or a great axe. D10 damage. That's kind of scary. Some of the characters only have 4 to 6 hit points. So a D10 damage can be pretty scary, but not if you roll 3. So that was kind of underwhelming. And then, a couple more rounds, the Minotaur swings and misses again, hits 1 other character, and then it dies. Well, that means it only got 2 hits in. It did, I think, less than 10 points of damage, maybe 11 points of damage total to 2 characters. There's 6 of them, remember. So 4 of them walked out of that combat completely unscathed. So there was, no threat really for that. And so this monster was a bit underwhelming. So that was a learning experience for me to ensure that if I have a boss type monster, and let me qualify this. The adventure doesn't say it's a boss. It's kind of implied that it's a boss because it's clearly the strongest monster in the adventure, but it doesn't actually say that it is the boss monster. So it's not statted up to be a boss monster. So, to be fair, it was basically just a Minotaur. Fairly tough for a second level group, but still at the same time, it's just a standard monster. It's not like Demogorgon or a boss that is named and is supposed to be a more long-lasting threat. So my fault, I guess, for not seeing that ahead of time and buffing up the Minotaur to be a little bit tougher for this final fight. But, again, I'm just learning this game. So I'm just trying to play it rules as written as much as possible. And, try not to start messing with it until I've actually used the rules as written. Once I use the rules as written and I don't like them, then I can feel free to house rule them. But at least I have to get through several sessions and get a good feel for the rules as written before I start, screwing around with them. Okay, so that's one issue with the monsters. Let me talk about another issue that I have with the spellcasting rules as written in Shadowdark. This is the one rule that right out of the gate I house rolled. So the house rule here is, or the actual rule in Shadowdark is that a caster, whether it be the wizard or whether it be the priest, the casters have to make a casting roll in order to see if they cast a spell. And the casting DC is 10 plus the spell rank. So if it's a rank 1 spell, the DC is 11. If it's a rank 6 spell, the DC is 16. So my first issue is that the characters, the casting mechanic doesn't have it doesn't level up. It doesn't scale with the characters leveling up. So a 5th level wizard still has to roll a DC that is equal to 10 plus the rank of the spell. But the only modifier they get is their intellect modifier, or their intelligence modifier, which if that intelligence modifier doesn't increase or doesn't increase much, then they have the same ability to succeed in a casting spell at 1st level as they do at 5th level. And they have higher rank spells to cast, which makes the DC higher and harder for those spells. But they don't have a way to boost their spell casting. So it's not like they don't have a proficiency bonus. So they don't get that proficiency boost every 2 or 3 levels. The only thing that they can do is when they level up, they have the potential for being able to get a ability score boost, but they have to roll that on the downtime table to see what ability they get. It's random, so it's not like they can choose it. So they may or they may not get an ability score boost in the 10 levels that they have in this game. So that means the spellcasters are going to be more and more hard pressed to cast spells successfully, especially the higher level the spell is. And the low level spells are going to be just as difficult to cast at high levels as they were at low levels. So that whole spellcasting issue, I may have to house rule, and I'm not really sure how to do that yet. So that's one problem I have with the spellcasting mechanic. I like the casting rule, incidentally. I don't like spell slots. I don't like the Vancian systems. I do like rolling to see if you can cast a spell. I just think that as you gain an experience, it should be easier for you to cast lower level spells. And, it should not be as difficult to cast higher level spells as you gain higher levels. So, that's the problem that I have with the system. Another thing that I don't like about the rule as written, and I did house rule this from the get-go, that is when you fail a casting check, you lose the spell for the rest of the day until you take a long rest. That's harsh. Wizards only get 2 spells, or 2 or 3 spells, same with the priests, and the very first 2 attempts to cast a spell, they could lose both spells, just like that. So I took a page out of Dungeon Crawl Classics, and instead of having them lose the spell, if they fail to cast the spell, I have that increase their miscast threshold. So the miscast threshold starts off at a natural 1. So if you roll a natural 1, then you have a spell miscast. So what I have it do is the more you fail to cast any spells that are not, a critical failure. So, if your spell DC is 11 and you roll an 8, you fail to cast that spell, but it's not a critical fail. However, it increases the threshold of your critical fail. Now your critical fail is 1 to 2 instead of just 1. Which means if you roll a 1 or a 2, then it's a critical failure. And you have to roll on the miscast table or you have to do penance. So that continues on. You keep your spell. You can cast as many times as you want, but the threshold for a critical failure continues to increase with each failure that you get. This is a hell of a lot more fun than you just lose a spell. Because now the player has to wage, am I going to risk, another healing spell when I have a 25% chance of critical failure? And something really bad could happen from that. So that's the house rule that I implemented right out of the gate. And so far that's been working fine. It's been working very well in my game. Okay, so that's that. Another thing that I like about the game is that none of the player characters have dark vision. Nobody can see in the dark. My players hate that. They hate it. They want to be able to see in the dark. They want characters to be able to see in the dark. Which I don't blame them from a character perspective. Nobody wants to be handicapped by any type of affliction. They don't want to be blinded. They don't want to be deafened. They don't want to have any type of affliction. But darkness isn't really an affliction. You purposefully put yourself into a situation where there is darkness. So it's not something that's being imposed upon you. It's something you enter into willingly. The fact that you can't see in the darkness should be a factor, should be a risk factor for them. But in games like D&D and Pathfinder, it's not, because you have half the party that has dark vision and the other half that has ways of getting magical light or something to that effect. So I don't like that about D&D. That's one of the things that really irks me about most fantasy role-playing games, not just D&D. And I like that about Shadow the Demon or Shadowdark, that every character is equally blind in dark environments, meaning that darkness is actually scary. And so I really enjoy that aspect of the game. And I'm sorry, players. You're just gonna have to get used to it, because darkness should be scary. It should be scary. That's it. So that's that. Let me see what else. There are other aspects of the game that are a little bit more minor. The gear slots, I kind of like those. Experience points. The experience point system in this game is fine. The problem with experience points that I have with every game that has experience points is the confusion that it causes with players that are writing down their experience points wrong, that are not paying attention when experience points are awarded. I don't keep track of the experience points that I give out. I just say, okay, you each get 3 experience points. If they're not paying attention, they're not paying attention. But then we run into situations like we had last night, where one character is showing that they have more experience points than some other player that's been accumulating experience points at the same rate as the other player. So which one of them is right? I don't know. I don't want that bookkeeping. I don't want it. That's a pain in my ass. That's why I like milestone leveling. So I may be dropping experience points for that reason. I don't want the bookkeeping. I don't want to have to be in charge of writing down every experience point that I give, when I gave it, what I gave it for, who was present, who got the experience points, who didn't. It's just too much for this gray hair to handle. So I may have to drop experience points out of Shadowdark. So that is still a thing that I'm pondering. Let's see what else. Spells are pretty simple and straightforward. There's a lot of looseness in this game, so I think there's a lot of opportunity for DMs to take this core game and enhance it with house rules. And I've been tempted to do this myself, but we have to be real careful if we do that, because the whole point of this game is its simplicity. And if we start adding house rules to complicate the game more, then you might as well go back to playing 5th edition D&D, because that's where that road leads to. Now, that's not to say that you can't add a couple of house rules, like the house rule I just added for spellcasting. That doesn't add any complexity, or very little complexity, and so I have no problem with that. Do I want to add flanking? Do I want to add or a house rule for higher ground? Do I want to add more and more house rules to make the game more and more complicated? I don't want to. I don't want to add that complexity. I want to keep the game simple as it's intended. Now, does that mean to say that I can't award certain things? Like if a player character goes through great strengths to, climb up on a higher embankment to be able to stab down at a creature, should they not get a bonus for that? I want to be able to say, okay, for that particular attack, you get a +1 bonus. I don't want to give advantage and disadvantage too much glory in this game. It's already baked in the system, and I'm not a fan of advantage and disadvantage, because I think they're too good. I think a better way to have gone in this game would have been going back to +1 bonuses, +1 to +3 bonuses, because by taking out all the other complexity, you really don't need the simplified advantage and disadvantage mechanic, because the whole reason things get complicated in D&D to necessitate an advantage or disadvantage was because you had too many bonuses that were stacking on each other, and you had to keep track of all these bonuses, how long they lasted, and all that stuff. And it got to be a bookkeeping nightmare in 3rd edition and 4th edition, and that's why in 5th edition they came up with advantage and disadvantage. But you don't have that in Shadowdark. So I would have preferred doing away with advantage and disadvantage and just have small bonuses that you give out. And, if you want to keep it simple, you can say you only have one bonus at a time, so they don't, no bonuses stack. You can have the highest bonus that is afforded to you at any given time. So if you get a +1 bonus from this and you get +2 bonus from this, you only get the +2 bonus. That's it. A +1 bonus, +2 bonus is much easier to accept in your game than advantage and disadvantage. Advantage and disadvantage is way too swingy. And when you have spells like protection from evil, which provides, protection to the characters that it's cast on, and which means that monsters have to roll with disadvantage against them. That's just too good. That is too good, especially for a first level spell. So yeah, I'm not a fan of. I'm not going to house rule that away, at least not yet. I'm going to continue with advantage and disadvantage, but again, that's one of those things that I will keep on the back of my mind. Can I house rule this? Should I house rule this, or just live with it? At this point, I'm just going to live with it, but we shall see. Okay, so what else? What else in my game did I find interesting or not so interesting? Okay, so one thing that I really want is the core rulebook. I want the actual rulebook because right now I have the player's guide and the GM's guide that I printed out myself from the quick start rules, and I have them in a binder, and I'm flipping pages all over the place. So I need two things. I need my core rulebook physical in hand, and I need my my game master screen. Because there's too many things that we continue to look up in this game, like weapon attack damage values, how much equipment costs, how much armor costs, how much all these things that we have to reference throughout the game. I keep flipping back and forth, and I don't know the rule books well enough to know where they're at. So I'm like spending minutes trying to find the shit in the rule book, and I can't find it. So I'm either going to have to bookmark these things until I get my core rule book, and I don't know what I'm going to have to do with my core rule book. I don't want to have to bookmark things in there, but I don't like flipping back and forth. The font in the rules is big, so that means there's more pages, less information on one page, which means more flipping back and forth on pages, and until I'm familiar with where the rules are in the book, then I'm going to need to do something different. So that's that's a me problem. It should be alleviated when I get my great game master screen and my actual rule book. But right now it's kind of just a pain in the butt. Okay, so I bitched a lot about the game, but I really want to give it its fair shake here. It is a fun game. I think I've run 4 sessions now, 4 or 5 sessions, and up to 8 players, and it runs fairly smoothly. So I got to give kudos to the designer. She did a good job with this game, and this may be my new go-to fantasy role-playing game. Just high fantasy, I should say. I'm always going to go back to my Shadow of the Demon Lord, but as far as high fantasy game, this may be my D&D replacement. At least until something better comes along. Okay, so that's it for Tonight We Game. I want to thank you for watching. If you like these videos, please hit the subscribe button. And I'll see if I can get a few more, crank out a few more of these videos, at least a little bit more frequently. Okay, thank you for watching. I'm out of here.